Today on DIY Dave, a totally different video. We're not working on the car, we're not working in the garage, we're not repairing an oven. We're going to be doing something in my wheelhouse, and that is in the tech business. I'm a software developer by trade, and I've got this old server hardware that is in desperate need of update, and I decided to throw a whole bunch of new hardware at it to see if we can get a little bit more life out of it. It's been running for several years and needs an upgrade, and I thought, well, what the heck, I'll bring you guys along. Today on DIY Dave. So here's the question. I've got a server with 7-year-old hardware in it, and I need to upgrade it, but I really don't want to go to the expense of new motherboard, new CPU, new memory, and the whole 9 yards. Can I throw a whole bunch of new software at this old server and get a little bit more life out of it? Let's find out today on this very special tech edition of DIY Dave. So how are we going to do this upgrade to this existing hardware? Well, we're going to take all of this new hardware, 4 brand new 4 terabyte Toshiba hard drives, some mounting hardware, some cable splitters, an SSD to boot from, and a new upgrade to our interior network to 2.5 gigabits. We're going to plug all these guys into our existing server. We're going to throw as much as we possibly can at it to see just how hard we can push this old hardware. We're going to build it from the ground up with the SSD is going to be our boot drive, and it's going to contain the boot system of Proxmox. Proxmox is a virtualization environment, version 7.3, and inside Proxmox, we're going to run 3 virtual machines. The 3 virtual machines, one is going to be our host for pfSense, which will be our firewall and DHCP server. Number 2 will be a virtual machine to run piHole, which is an ad whitelisting server that blocks ads from coming into our request, and it will serve every device in the house. Number 3 will be the big hairy gorilla in the room, and that will be TrueNAS. That's going to run our network attached storage for the 4 Toshiba N300 4 terabyte drives that I showed in the intro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down, because I'm going to give you straight shots of screen captures as I go through each install. I try on my channel to give real world experience, and I'm going to give you the videos, the screen captures off of my laptop as I go through each of these setups. So there may be a hiccup, there may be a glitch, and the only thing I'll take out are things that are just be too boring to watch, long wait times for setups or installs to take place. But if I mess up, you're going to see it, and I'll try to fix it and explain what I do as best I can. I will also put timestamps in the video, one for the installation of Proxmox, one for the installation of pfSense, one for the installation of piHole, and the last one for the installation of TrueNAS. And then we'll sum it all up with a little bit of performance review and some thoughts about what we learned along the way. So let's get going. Okay, this is the old box. This is a Corsair case, super case. So we're going to take the walls off of this guy. Not going to go into a lot of detail. We're going to take out, this is the newest drive of these 3. This is our ancient original drive. We're going to keep it at least long enough to get some data off of it onto the new server once we migrate it, or the rebuilt box. And then we're also going to take care of this cable management nightmare, and then we're going to move this drive up here, and then have all 4 of these new 4 terabyte guys sitting right here, and we'll get it all plugged in. So we'll just dive into it. Won't bore you with all the details. We'll just fast forward through all of this. The hardware we're going to be reusing in this rebuild includes a Gigabyte H97D3 motherboard, an Intel i5 4460 CPU with 4 cores at 3.2 gigahertz. Yeah, I told you it was old. And 16 gigabytes of DDR3 CL9 memory. The motherboard has an onboard 1 gigabit NIC that we'll keep using as our outbound interface through my cable modem, but the house side NIC will be the new 2.5 gigabit NIC I mentioned in the equipment list. The motherboard also supports PCI Express version 3. It's got one PCIe X16 slot and one PCI X4 slot and two PCI by 1 slots. Just in the middle of the pre-rebuild update, everything's going great. We pulled out all the old drives. We've moved the one drive we want to preserve up here into one of these 5 1/4 inch bays. We've installed our SSD, and I used this set of adapter plates. These are adapter plates I bought a 4-pack from Amazon, and they come with a boatload of screws, and they can accept a 2.5 inch device or a 3.5 inch device. And you can take, like for the example, the SSD has mounting screws on the bottom, throw in there. Or you could take a larger 3.5 inch drive, put it here, and mount it from the side. Mount it from the side, slide it into the tray, and then these holes allow you to put screws in to secure it both directions. Very clever little gadget, very, very useful if you have a case and you're trying to reorient some drives and you want to take advantage of those extra drive bays. So we've got those 2 drives in. Now we're going to plug in the Toshibas in the lower part, and we'll be getting ready to reattach everything. Okay, we've got the server reconfiguration is done. There are our 4 Toshiba N300 4TB drives. There is the tray with the SSD and our old Seagate master boot drive. So that's all 6 SATA slots that this motherboard supports. Tried to do a little cable management. It's not perfect, but it at least has things out of the way. We've got some things tied off. That's unused ports for a video adapter that I don't have plugged in separately. So we're going to go around here to the back side. There are the 4 back sides of the 4 drives with their plugs, power plugs, and the SATA data cables. Got those tied up. Run through. It's pretty clean. I'm happy with this. The one thing that I did remember, given the age of this motherboard, I had forgotten when I first put it together, the USB connector is really finicky. That's a USB 3 header on the motherboard there, and it is really difficult to get that header connector to stay in. It came out a couple of times, and it came out sideways and bent the pins, so I had to fight with it a little bit to get it back together. But the bottom line is, it's all together. We've got the 2.5 gig Ethernet NIC in there. So we're going to button this back up, and we're going to plug it in, and we're going to see if we can install Proxmox. Okay, the server is rebuilt. It's all put back together. I've got all the plugs hooked up. I've got my HDMI capture card in, so I'm going to grab my laptop. And we're going to fire this thing up, and we're going to see what it does cold, first time through, see what happens. Okay, now, as I said in the intro, we're going to be installing Proxmox, TrueNAS Core, and pfSense. Now, we're also going to be installing piHole for our ad elimination server, for our DNS ad elimination server, but that requires its own underlying operating system. It doesn't come with its own ISO installer. I'm going to be installing these into Proxmox's virtual machine environments, but before we do that, we've got to do a little bit of preparation. Proxmox, we're going to be installing to a USB stick. So to grab that, we're going to go to the Proxmox website. We're going to go to the Proxmox website and download, at the time of this writing, the Proxmox VE 7.3 ISO installer. We're going to burn that to a bootable image on a bootable flash drive. Now, for pfSense, they have their own installer, but here is the URL, pfsense.org/downloads. I'm going to be downloading the 64-bit installer that we're going to be using as an ISO image. We're going to install that to Proxmox, install the VM from Proxmox using its ISO repository. So we're going to hit download for that, which I've already done. We've got that grabbed. And now we need a host operating system under which we can install piHole plus Unbound for our DNS server. Ubuntu, this is just the Ubuntu. We're going to install the headless Ubuntu 22.04 server. So we're going to hit the download link there, and it's going to download download that again, and download that and get that set up. And then we have TrueNAS Core. TrueNAS Core is the system that we're going to be using to provide our new SMB shares with our new drives that we're going to be installing into the new box. We're going to be putting, as I mentioned before, we're going to be putting the Proxmox ISO onto a bootable USB stick and booting our machine from that and installing it to the SSD on my server. For creating a bootable USB stick, there are a couple of different options you can use to do that. I particularly use Balena Etcher. This is a free download. You simply flash from a file. You pick the target. I've already burnt the ISO for this thing. It takes a few minutes. You select the target, plug the USB stick in, select the target, hit flash. It does the rest. Now we're going to go ahead and move to the machine with all of the new drives configured and installed and actually get this thing rolling. So let's get going. Okay, so we have it all back together and we are going to turn this beast on. You're going to see this cold right off the top to see what happens. Got it plugged in, so let's see what happens. There we go. Power is on. Are we going to get anything on the screen? I was struggling a little bit with the capture card and didn't realize I needed to hit the F12 button to escape the BIOS boot, and it tried to go into my old Ubuntu installation. So I went through a couple of cycles of this before I finally got it right. Whoops. Okay, what it ended up doing is that it found the old Ubuntu startup, which we did not want. So I just didn't capture the boot screen quick enough. So we'll start again. Boot. There we go. There's our boot menu. Well, the obvious goof here was that there's no boot menu for the USB stick. I forgot to plug it in. I did take a moment here into the BIOS, make sure virtualization was turned on. I knew it already was because I ran VirtualBox when I was running Ubuntu on this box. So we'll skip past this part and get to the reboot where we got into the Proxmox installer. So now we've rebooted and we're getting ready to see the boot menu. We now have the SanDisk in the menu, and that's going to kick us into the Proxmox installer environment. One thing in the text menus for the Proxmox installer, the highlighted option is a little tough to tell, and I got a little sideways on it. No big deal, just something to be aware of. Here we go. We are loading the Proxmox installer. Awesome. Now, one mistake I made here when I reassembled the machine was to plug in my network card into my NIC from my cable modem. So when Proxmox booted, it got a DHCP address from my ISP, which is Cox. And then I realized I had no local LAN address that I could use to access the web interface that Proxmox installs. So I go through this, don't notice it initially, but then I go through the setup again and reassign those interfaces. Okay, so we are going to scroll through the license agreement, agree, next. Country is United States, time zone will be Chicago. Don't know why they have a monopoly in that time zone because I'm not in Chicago. Next, password. Now, this is where I got myself in a lot of trouble pointlessly. All you need to do here is specify a local IP address on your home subnet and press on. Don't worry about the management interface or host name. I got all caught up in the weeds, so don't make the same mistake I did. You'll see me reboot Proxmox and realize I've got a public-facing IP address that I can't get into, so I have to do a reinstall. Okay. Let's make sure it picked the right drive. Yeah, it did. I just realized that I hadn't remembered a place where I picked the hard drive, but it did. It picked up the yeah, we're good.
I'm speeding this part up about 10x. It's about a 2-minute install. There's no point in going all through that.
So when this thing is done, it's going to reboot. And the worst thing that can happen, is that it reboots into a system or a state that I don't like. I reboot and I start over again. So it's no big deal. Yeah, it did. That's exactly what I thought it was going to do.
So this is where I realized I made the mistake. It finally dawned on me where the error was. So I took a moment, disabled some boot configurations that would slow me down, and then pressed on, realizing I needed to reinstall.
Okay, let's see what happens if it boots up from here. Because I have no way of, that's an internet address and I cannot physically get to it from that interface. So I'm going to have to redo this, and I'm going to stop the recording for right now, and I will reconfigure Proxmox to point to an IP address I can get to.
So we pick up the install after going through the Proxmox reinstall with the proper IP address, and we're getting ready to reboot the system and finish it off.
Getting ready to boot. Yay. Reboot and point your web browser to 1054 on port 8006. We're all done with this, so it can continue. It started in a debug. And it looks like we're in. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and stop this right now, and I will try to resume working on this from the web interface because my machine should be on the network even though we don't have actual internet access. So stand by. I did give the laptop, it was on Wi-Fi, I gave it a 10 dot address on the local network, and now I can reach Proxmox via my local network. So advanced proceed. Username is root. There's my valid subscription for the server. We know by prior rule that that is not relevant. Don't have a subscription for the service, don't care. And there we are. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to delete this local LVM, because ordinarily one of the things is that you have to have a separate physical source for your ISOs and for your virtual machines. Now, in my setup, I understand that that is the ideal configuration and it's done for safety purposes. If you end up with a situation where your drive crashes, you crater all your installations, you're toast. So I'm willing to accept that risk. Okay, so now we've got Proxmox started up, and now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this local storage. We're in the data center mode, and we've gone down here to the storage tab, and then we're going to hit remove. Yes, we're going to remove that local storage, and it's gone. And now we're going to open up the shell. There's the shell. So now what we're going to do, the first thing we're going to remove that we're going to formally remove that partition. So that's going to be a matter of issuing the commands lv remove /dev pve data. Yes, that data is removed. Now we're going to resize the partition to take the whole thing. lv resize shell plus 100% FREE dev PVE root. Resize the root, so that's good. That works. So now we will go back to data center and storage. So now we have this, and we are going to storage local. We're going to edit, and we're going to take everything. Now it can do anything. So now we are going to install, we're going to upload our ISOs. Okay, we are now over here in Data Center Proxmox Local under ISO images. We're going to upload, and I have them, actually I had them on the SD. I thought we would end up having to install the ISOs from the USB stick on the server, but since this is browser based on my laptop, we can get them off my local laptop, which is where I installed them anyway. So we're going to select those. So we're going to install the pfSense. There's the pfSense ISO.
Now we're going to repeat this process for the other ISOs for Ubuntu and TrueNAS, so there's no point in going that at full speed. So we're going to race through this and get to the completion of the ISO uploads.
Okay, there is the ISO. It's been checked. It's done, so it all worked. So now we have our TrueNAS, pfSense, and Ubuntu ISOs loaded. We're ready to create virtual machines almost. One of the things that I intend to do with this is pass through the 4 new Toshiba SATA disks to TrueNAS. I also want to pass through my external facing NIC to pfSense. That way, this Proxmox will essentially not have a direct link to the internet other than through my home network, which will go through pfSense.
Now, in order to allow hardware pass-through to virtual machines in Proxmox, we have to make sure that IOMMU is enabled as a boot time parameter to the kernel. So we're going to open up the shell in Proxmox, take a look at the kernel boot messages to see if IOMMU is enabled, and if not, then we will update that parameter, reconfigure Proxmox, and then go about building our virtual machines. Now, what we see here as we open up the shell and take a look at those kernel messages, we'll see here that there is no IOMMU loaded at boot time. So what we're going to have to do here is change the parameters to the boot line and reboot Proxmox.
Okay, took a look at, went to the etc default folder or directory where the grub configuration file is noted, and I noticed that IOMMU is not specifically enabled. So we're going to fix that. And the way we do that, we're going to enable IOMMU and pass-through. So we're going to do that by modifying that, and we're going to put Intel IOMMU equals on and IOMMU equals PT. And then we're going to hit Control O to write it to write it, and then Control X. And we're going to reboot.
And some of you are probably already seeing the mistake I made. I did not update the grub bootloader. So went through one reboot cycle, noticed that IOMMU is not enabled, and realized my mistake.
Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't update Grub. I did not update Grub. One of the things you have to do, I'm an idiot, update Grub. Oh. Okay, now, hate it when you do stupid things like that. So we'll wait until it comes back. If it's back, should be. Now, what happens if we see dmessage grep IOMMU? Yeah, there we go. Pass-through is set and IOMMU is set. Fantastic. That is a great positive result. That's why it's important to check and always be sure to update grub when you're finished with running the bootloader. So we are finished. We are ready to start making virtual machines. Okay, we're ready to create a VM. We're going to go right, we're going to create a VM. The first VM that we're going to create is going to be pfSense. That's going to be our number one VM. We're going to call it, that's going to be the name of my router. We're going to call it Marvel. I like, that should be just the default resource pool. Next. Storage local, ISO image is going to be pfSense. We're going to leave all that default. Disks, we're going to create a single SCSI disk. We're going to give it 50 gigs, should be plenty. Those parameters. We're going to give it one CPU. And then memory, I'm not even going to give it that much. I don't think pfSense needs more than 512. If I need to adjust it, I will. And we're going to do no network because we're going to add two different networks. We're going to actually have two different ones. We're not going to start it and just say we're just going to go ahead and create it. Now we're going to add two NICs. We're going to pass through the NIC that I will use that's exposed to my cable modem. So we're going to add, this is going to be, we're going to add a PCI device. We're going to pass through, that's why we did all that IOMMU. We're going to pass through the onboard 1 gigabit NIC. That's this guy right here. We're going to do all functions, and then we will hit add. And now we're going to add another, but this is going to be bridged. This will be a network device via virtual bridge. Bridge 0 is the only one. And we will hit add. Great. So now what we have is the public IP, the public interface passed through, and it should go all the way to my pfSense LAN, and because it retains the physical hardware MAC address, when pfSense comes up, it should pull the IP address from my cable modem, and Proxmox doesn't see it. So let me go plug in the network cable. Okay, I have plugged in the LAN cable, and hopefully this will enable us now to fire up pfSense and start this puppy. Let's start her up. There's our pfSense. Perfect. This is working perfectly, exactly the way we wanted it. Okay, we're going to accept. Install pfSense. Continue with default key map. We will just do guided route on ZFS.
I think if I had it to do over again, I would pick something other than ZFS for the root file system. They're hard on SSDs.
No stripe, no redundancy. We're just going to go. Let her rip. It's the only drive it knows about. Installation is finished. Wow. Rebooting. So there's our Proxmox VM booting from its disk. Okay, minimum RAM of 512 meg. May want to adjust that, no problem. So it's going to come through and it wants to know what my interfaces are, and I expected that it would want something to define what the different states would be. So we're going to find that. For IO networking adapter, we're not going to do no VLANs. We're not going to do any VLANs. The WAN interface is CM0. Invalid interface name. Oh, EMO. Don't mind me. My glasses aren't the best. LAN interface name is VTNet0. This will automatically enable firewalling. Yes, I do wish to proceed. So I want to change. It has done everything that I would expect correctly. It's the WAN interface is my IP for my cable modem, and my LAN interface. That is a correct inference for it to make, but I'm going to change that because I'm going to. We're going to go to number 2, set IP address password. I went to configure 2 static. This one is going to be 10.10.10.1, 24 bits. The upstream is going to be, it is its own gateway. No IP6 address. Do I want to enable the DHCP server on the LAN? Yes. The start range of the IP4 client address range, we're going to make that 10.10.10.20. We will go to 10.10.10.200. I have some other machines. Oh, that won't matter anymore because that machine is gone. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to have it. We'll have the ability to reserve machines 1 through 19 for static addresses, and then up through 200 for other devices on the network. And no, we will not revert to HTTP. Rebuilding. Perfect. Enter to continue. That's what we want. Let's reset the web configurator password. Admin and pfSense, we will set that. So now let's see if we can open up another tab and go to yes, sir. There we go. Fantastic. So we're going to change the password. For now, we'll go back through and later on I'm going to recommend that we disable the default admin account. You shouldn't ideally be able to get to this site, but internally, because this will only be private to my network, but I'm going to end up changing that to an internal account only, and then I'm going to disable the admin account. And folks, the question is now, do we have internet access? Not yet. Still doesn't like the fact that we have no internet just yet. So let me go do a little checking offline and we'll investigate in a little bit. We finally figured it out. Took me a second, but I had DNS set up incorrectly. So here's what I did. I went into, first of all, I had on interfaces assignments. Oops, not there. I had system routing. I had defined a default route on the gateway, a default route through the gateway on the gateway, which means it kept looping on itself. I've done that to myself before, and I should have known better, and I didn't. So I deleted that. I can't make the DHCP6 gateway go away. I don't need it, don't want it. I'm not using it, and I've set it to none, but for some reason it still puts it on there, so it doesn't matter. I just wish it would go away. Now it has a default route. Anything that's outside my local home network now goes out my main DHCP route, whatever my server's address is. And now under interfacing services, I've gone over here to DNS for a DNS forwarder. I've enabled the DNS forwarder. I've turned on the DHCP server so this thing can start spitting out addresses. And I've told it to register static mappings for a few devices that I got allocated statically that I don't want changing. And then I've temporarily got it configured to use Google's DNS servers just for now, but we're going to install piHole and get rid of ads. We're going to do that later. That's a separate virtual machine. But right now, things are working. I've gone over here to a new tab and I can go to google.com, look at that, it works, or I can go to ESPN.com. We're in business. So we now have pfSense working. It's got my local to external address. We are connected to the internet again, and we are good to go. So we're going to take a stop right there, take a break, come back, and then we will look at getting piHole and then TrueNAS set up. We can declare success with Proxmox. We clearly can declare success with pfSense. So now what I want to do is set up piHole. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up piHole. Now piHole, if you're not familiar with piHole, this is a special kind of DNS server. It's a recursive forwarding DNS server that basically whitelists out ad services. If it's a website that matches a database of known sites that serve up nothing but ads, if it's served up as your primary DNS server, it will return a no find essentially back upstream. And then if it's a real site that doesn't hit the whitelist, then it will forward it on to the authoritative servers that you've configured, and that's through a tool called Unbound. Now, Unbound is yet another tool that goes to the root DNS, the root domain server for the subject domain, and gets the information directly from them and starts caching those entries. So you are essentially bypassing all of those servers. You're bypassing all of those cached servers, and you greatly reduce your exposure to adware. So we're going to create a new VM. So this is now going to be 101 on the Proxmox node. We're going to call this piHole. And we're going to do the ISO image for now piHole does not install on its own ISO. You install a base operating system and then you install piHole on top of it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use Ubuntu Live Server. And we're going to use guest type of Linux. That's fine. System is going to be default. We're not going to change any of those guys. And disk, we're going to allocate a 50 gig minimal disk. Use again, piHole takes almost nothing, so we're going to allocate this a minimal. We're just going to give it one core, one thread, and we're not even going to give this guy. I'm going to drop that to 768K at most is all we need. Yeah, 768, that's plenty. Network, we're going to have a bridged device. Actually, I'm not going to add a network device this way. I'm going to add it through the, and we're going to finish that. We're not going to start it after it's created. And now we have, there's our, okay, and we're going to add hardware. Add, we're going to add a network device.
Now, when we add a network here, we're going to add a bridged adapter to our local LAN. We will not be passing through a PCI network adapter like pfSense.
Okay, so we probably could have done the same thing here. We're not firewalling that because we're already firewalled. And let's see, that's should be good to go. And I say we go ahead and start. Let's start this guy. Oh, I hadn't hit console. I'm an idiot. Okay, kernel panic. No working init found. Something's not right. Okay, after I've been away from the recording for probably an hour, I could not get Ubuntu Server 22.04 to install. I re-downloaded the ISO. I changed the configuration of the number of cores. I tweaked and changed. I couldn't get it to go. So just out of a random chance, I downloaded the ISO for the previous release of Ubuntu version 20, fired right up, no problem. So there's something funky. I did a little checking on some forums and some Reddit discussions about Ubuntu having problems, Ubuntu 22.04 having problems in VMs. And there does not seem to be a universal thread of, aha, this is the problem. So I didn't want to mess with it. I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and
Should be noted, this is a stock install of 2004, nothing special, and I didn't waste the time capturing that.
install piHole right here on this guy as it sits. To install piHole, type curl. Probably have to do sudo curl -ssl. And we're going to go https:// install.piHole.net. Okay. The DNS is not correct. So we got a DNS issue for
Okay, if you'll notice that last line there in etcresolve.conf, it shows that the local name server for this box is 27.0.0.53. Now, what that rang a bell for me was that's Network Manager for Ubuntu kicking in and making it self-referential for DNS resolution. That becomes a problem because getting changes to stick in resolve.conf required the installation of a separate package. You then modified a copy, invoke the service, and that updated resolve.conf, which should point to 127.0.0.1. I did that. That fixed the issue, but I think the hassles that I had installing Ubuntu with Network Manager and the resolution issues strongly suggest it might just be simpler to use a simpler distribution, like maybe Debian, Debian, or your favorite other installation, because the piHole installation steps are substantially the same, if not identical. All of the other steps that I took to make this work for Ubuntu are way outside the scope of this video. We're going to press on with getting piHole installed.
And now we're going to try to install piHole again, which is where we were a while ago. So yes, we want to install. We've been through this before. I may edit the prior installation now because there's not much point in repeating this, but we're going to go through at least one successful installation. I have gone through this before, so if I make references to the previous time that I installed it and haven't edited them out, please forgive me. Okay, this thing needs a static IP, and the installer is a little different. Normally it gives you a chance to migrate this to a static IP, and it is already static. It now has its 201 IP address. We're going to let the upstream provider just be Google for now. And yes, we're going to install all the. Yeah, we're going to install logging for now. Yay! It's resolving. The piHole admin, yes. It says it's done, but I don't know what my password is.
Because I'd had so much trouble with the first installation, I had neglected to write down the initial password piHole installer provides. So when I went back through this time and it preserved that old setting, I didn't know what the password was. So I just need to drop out to a shell and run a command to change the password.
Okay, new password set. Let's try it over here. Yay, I'm in. Woohoo! Okay, now.
Now with piHole up, now we go about installing Unbound.
Okay, did a little checking, and it looks to me like piHole is running exactly the way it should. So now we're going to go ahead and install Unbound. So now we're going to go back over here to our connection. Actually, we're just going to start up a secure shell session, I think, to it. That'll be actually cleaner. We're going to do SSH to 10.10.10.201. So, first step is sudo apt get update. There's that. Sudo apt install Unbound. Yes, I wish to continue. That's okay. Perfect. That's right. We gotta get the configuration file. Okay. The piHole website has a configuration script for Unbound at docs.pi-hole.net/guide/dns/unbound, and the configuration script for Unbound to run under piHole is this guy right here. That's this chunk of text. That needs to be added as a configuration file in this folder. So I am going to do sudo nano piHole.conf. Make sure that I'm in the right direction. There's all that goodness right there.
and we are changing that interface port to 5535, and then we're going to write it and quit it, and then exit. And then I think all we need to do is do we need to sudo service unbound restart. And it restarted dig piHole.net at 1.p5335. Yeah, buddy, it works. Woohoo! And you see there's a DNSSEC validation. We can do dig fail01.DNSSEC works at 127.0.0.1. And it worked. Wow, works perfectly. So now what we've got to do is we've got to go back to piHole now and go to our local DNS, settings, DNS, and now we're unchecking these guys, and now we're using a custom upstream server, which is now our piHole, and the piHole is at 10.10.10.201 # hashtag Dr. Thorpe, whatever. And we'll save it. Yay! Now that we've got that working, we've got to go back to pfSense
and change its upstream DNS server from Google to our local piHole, going from pfSense to piHole to Unbound to the domain authority servers.
Set up a DNS server system. General setup DNS server. We no longer have this. We're going to, the DNS server now is by default 10.10.10.201. And we will save. It's saving. Hot diggity dogs. Perfect. It's getting perfect.
Had a little bit of a muddled explanation when I was recording this. So you've got two options here. Now that we have DNS working through the piHole, you could tell pfSense through its DHCP server to tell everyone to go directly to the piHole, or go to pfSense, which forwards everything to the piHole. If I point it to the piHole from pfSense, I can change the back end behind pfSense anytime I want, and my clients never know. So we're done with piHole, it's working, and we are ready to install TrueNAS.
We are here for the last big creation that we're going to undertake, and that is going to involve our new hard drives. We're going to build a TrueNAS Core based network attached storage server, and we're going to this could be our biggest VM. We're going to put 2 cores on it, and then we're going to give it 10 gig of memory, and we're going to see if that works. So let's go ahead, and we're going to create the VM. This would be VM102. Name is going to be, I'm going to call this Freedom. We will, start at boot. we're going to, yeah, we're showing advanced operating system. We're going to make this the TrueNAS installer. The default disk is going to be SCSI. Now, I'm going to give 200 gig of disk space. And we're going to skip. We're going to hit next. We're going to give this 2 cores. And we're going to give this puppy 10 gig. Okay. There's 10 gig.
Just going to use the bridged adapter from our host for their internal network.
We're not going to firewall it because it's already firewalled. Next. And we're going to finish. So, let's go to the console. And let's start her up. Boot TrueNAS installer. Oh, I just realized I didn't attach the drives. Golly, I'm such an idiot. Oh my gosh. Shut down. Yeah, we're going to shut it down. There's a great article on the Proxmox website that gives you the how-to of how you go about assigning a physical disk through to virtual machine, and you have to do it from a shell. You can't do it from the GUI. The first thing is you want to do is install a package that lets you identify the disks that you have in your system. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the console. Oh, no. Sorry. Shell. That's what we want. I have a feeling that what we're going to end up doing is using a command line that assigns to the respective virtual machine these serial numbers associated with these devices. Oh, I forget. This is Debian. We don't have to do sudo. That comes from working with Ubuntu too long.
Couldn't get to the packages for the hardware lookup because I had statically assigned the IP for this guy. Therefore, it did not get the network DNS server. So I fixed that in resolve.conf and we press forward. Couldn't do the installation of the package until I did an apt update. Then I could go back and do an apt install. That got us access to the libraries to get the packages down.
That is a package that is procured to Proxmox. LSHW is not part of that. So let's see if we can now do our other one. There we go. There we go. It found it. So now, it took a while, but it finally found it. So now the command that we're going to type here is lshw class disk class storage. Here are our 4 devices, disks. It should be disks 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's how I configured them on the ports on the motherboard. So that is exactly what we expect. Now, note the device names. Now, we're reading here, this is what we're expecting. We get this information. Device names like dev SDC shouldn't be used, of course. that might change by reboots. We're going to use the stable dev disk by ID path instead. Check by listing all of that directory, then look for the disk added by matching serial number from LSHW and the physical disk. Okay, the serial numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to grep
These last 4 serial numbers match our new Toshiba drives.
So ultimately what we're doing is we're going to end up ultimately researching the identifiers to add to the virtual machine. That's what this QM command is for. Is the device talking to a virtual machine, setting this virtual device ID, this virtual machine ID on this interface, the SCSI2 interface, and the path indicated by that guy right there. That's ultimately what we're looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to go cat dev disk by ID, and let's do cat by ID. And there they are. We have 4 Toshiba drives right there. We're going to do a copy. Can I paste? Yes. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this editor, QM set, and we're going to go back, and I believe I know that our virtual machine number is 102. SCSI2 dev disk by ID. And we're going to copy that, and then we're going to do paste. So after we do each one of these commands to set them, then we have to update. So we end up having to do an update.
We're going to see here in a couple of minutes that I'm making a mistake. I'm adding update statements after these QM sets. I misread the directions. I realized those were 2 different kinds of commands for adding a disk to a virtual machine. Didn't need both, but we'll press on and get this script written, run it, and then we'll see what happens with what I had written so far.
Finally remembered how to do cut and paste in that. I've got it all typed up. So here's what we have. We're telling that we're going to set on the SCSI bus for virtual machine 102 this disk identifier, and then we're updating the VM to reflect that configuration change, passing it the exact same path. I think that's pretty simple, and we're just adding that for each one of the 4 devices. They all look correct to me. Okay. So we're going to make that executable with the chmod plus X. And here goes nothing. Did not like any of it. What did I do wrong? Oh, the update is the result of doing the QM. Ah. And that was my mistake. We've already added them. So now if we go back to our console and let's take a look, we're only seeing 2 drives. In fact, we're only seeing one. Oh. Oh, these are device numbers. Okay, we've got to give those independent device numbers for each disk that we add. I think I get it now. This should be SCSI 1, SCSI 2, SCSI 3, and SCSI 4. That I'm almost certain is where I'm going wrong. That's what we've got to do to add all these disks. Let's do this. I think I know how to fix it now. I made a let's go nano add QM disk. Here we go. QM set 102. 1, 2, 3, 4. I thought that was a bus identifier, not a, and we can take out Control K, Control K, Control K, Control K. We will now write, cancel. We're going to Control O to write, save it, and Control X. Now let's do it, see what this puppy does. Now that's going to solve our problem. I just am confident that's going to solve it. I really am. Let's go back over here to our Proxmox monitor. Bingo! It updated immediately. That's it. That's perfect. And let's make sure we have distinct. We do have distinct numbers for each one. So my mistake again, and again, this is part of the learning process. We now have that finished. We can now go ahead and install TrueNAS. So TrueNAS. So now we can go to our console, and we should start, and it should automatically start up with installer, and we will boot to the TrueNAS installer. Install. We're just going to install TrueNAS to our 200 gig partition that we allocated for the virtual disk for this system, so that should be okay. And yes, we're going to do UEFI. We're going to do just boot by BIOS. Yes, we'll create a 16 gig swap partition on the boot devices. And here we go. TrueNAS install has succeeded. So we will take away this guy. Oh, no, we will remove. Yep. And we will go back over here to the machine and hit OK. And hit 3. Configure network interfaces. Yes, we will do a network interface. Oh, web user interface at 10.10.125. TrueNAS. So now we will go over here to HTTP. Whack whack. There it is. There we go. Yes. Okay, so in TrueNAS, first thing we need to do is create us a pool. We're going to create a new pool. just call it master. How about that? And we're not going to put encryption on it. Yeah, we're not going to do it. We're going to do a RAID Z. Now that means that one disk could fail and the others could still maintain data, but you lose the storage capacity of one drive. So we are going to take that capacity and we're going to create it. So we now have our first TrueNAS data pool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do sharing, and we're going to create a Windows share. We're going to create Windows shares. Add. We're just going to call it NAS. Advanced options. I think that we're going to call it NAS root and submit. Okay. So NAS root has been enabled. Let's see now. I want to see about permissions. We're going to add. This is just a page where we're going to add a couple of user accounts. I'm going to add some user accounts that I don't have to publish here, but we'll go ahead and do that. I'll get some of those set up and we'll go from there. Okay, as I mentioned, I was taking some time to create a couple of accounts, and really nothing relevant as far as the configuration of TrueNAS. We should be able to just create a, let's see if we can create a plain text file. Uh-oh. I thought I had used this with a user that had write privileges to the folder. Let's see what the security provisions are. Okay, I think I may finally have cracked something. The permissions on the share were a little premature. I think what I needed to do first was create a data set. I want to create one for our scanner. We have a scanner, and sometimes my wife needs to scan stuff for school. So we will call it scans, and it's an SMB share. Edit permissions. Actually, everyone Okay, I'm just going through the ACL here that defines which users and groups have permissions to the share that I'm creating. All I really did here was build that default ACL for this share, dig through this because I had not seen this in depth. And the one thing that I didn't point out here is that for a lot of scanners where you scan direct to a network share, you've got to go into the SMB service settings and enable SMB1, the old Windows security system that's been since deprecated for security. At least you had to do that for the older scanners. And now, by default, we created an ACL
that essentially lets anyone talk to that share, write or read folders to it. Perfect. 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 That did the trick. So the mistake I made was jumping from creating a pool straight to sharing it. I didn't want to do that, which is not really how I wanted to do it anyway. The key is to start at the data set level, to start at the pool level, create data sets, apply ACLs to the data sets, and then create the shares. Well, as you can see, we are now, actually restoring off of my backups a rather large chunk of data. Well, for us, it's fairly large, a couple of terabytes that we are now migrating back onto our shares created off of our data sets in TrueNAS. And a couple of things this is going to run overnight, I think. We just can't get much beyond our limitation because I had to do this wireless. I don't have a wired machine I could have done this on, which would have availed us a better speed. Tried to mount the backup device remotely directly on the share, but it just wouldn't support talking to that cloud device. But one thing I wanted to point out, just as we evaluate this and let this get ready to sit overnight, here's Proxmox dashboard, and it's pointing out that in the middle of this big heavy-duty file copy operation, we are seeing still little to no CPU usage. I mean, we're only at 7%. It spiked briefly right when I started the copy operation at about 25%, but it's dropped steadily and has stayed below 10% ever since. But the one thing that we are doing is that of the 16 gig installed on the system, we're now using about 87% of it. We're at 13.5. The TrueNAS dashboard shows that it is using almost all of the 10 gig that I assigned to it. Let me go over here to the TrueNAS dashboard. It's got about 300 meg free. So I did a decent job of guesstimating what kind of size we would need. I think the one thing that that I had expected when I set this up was that we would not be taxing the CPUs and that we would be more likely to be taxing memory. And that's exactly what I think we've seen. We're going to go ahead and let this cook overnight, and we'll summarize this in the morning. But so far, this migration, this server rebuild has just gone fantastically. I can't be more pleased. Most of the errors were errors of ignorance on my own part, steps that I wrote down in my plan when I first set this out that I just skipped or didn't implement correctly. And then as you saw in other parts of the video, there were a couple of commands when I was allocating the drives to the VMs through Proxmox. I didn't put the commands in right, and those are just things that happen. But aside from what I thought would be the simplest part of this install would be setting up Ubuntu to host piHole. I thought that would be like 10 minutes, and that turned out to be arguably the biggest hassle of the whole thing because we couldn't get Ubuntu 22.04 to install at all. The installer would kernel panic, and I never solved that, gave up trying. But on balance, we're cooking. The server is happy. The drives are not generating really any appreciable noise that I know of, and we are in the process of copying a couple of terabytes. It's going to take overnight. So we're going to put a bow on this for tonight, and we will update ourselves in the morning and see where we stand. So we will talk to you then. Well, it is 8 o'clock the next morning, and what I'm realizing now is I'm an idiot. It was about 1:30 last night or earlier this morning when I started the file restore operation and realized that I could have just taken a network cable and plugged this thing into one of my switches and could have gotten a lot better throughput. I was so
preoccupied with getting it closer to my access point and getting a better Wi-Fi connection, my brain cells just didn't function enough to think, just go grab a cable. But that's what happens when you do stuff like this at 1:30 in the morning. Anyway, the file copy is going great. I'm getting what you would expect over Wi-Fi. The process is continuing, and I figure we've still got some time left before it finishes off copying and gets the rest of the files transferred. So anyway, we will reconvene a little bit later and put a wrap on this, because right now I think it's been a great project. So we will check back in a little later.
Well, how do we put a bow on this big server rebuild project? Well, it's been about 3 weeks, and in that time my new server has been running great until about 2 days ago. I had pretty much finished editing all of this video down into something I could finally upload, and then when I woke up Tuesday morning, my server was dead. I mean, dead. Walked into my office and the thing was stone cold. The fans weren't running, the drives weren't running. It was stone cold dead. Cycled the power and noticed immediately that the fan on the power supply itself wouldn't even turn on. Fortunately, I did have a backup. I had a Corsair power supply, a 650 watt unit, sitting on my shelf that had been unused and untouched. So I got the server, ripped it apart, plugged the new power supply in, and everything came back up. Now, I was a little bit concerned about the status of my NAS and the SSDs for Proxmox, because the thing came crashing down in an unstable state and I wasn't sure how to predict if it would all come back. But everything came back just perfect. So, aside from that scare, my rebuild project came out fantastically. After I finished the rebuild, I did go ahead and bump the server up to a full 32 gig RAM, and I did also add an additional SATA card for some additional drives that I had simply maxed out all the ports on my motherboard for. Now, on balance, aside from my scare with the power supply, the rebuilt server has performed fantastically. TrueNAS has been running, that with pfSense and piHole all running virtually, have run fantastically, and I'm tickled to death with the result. I also mentioned at the beginning of the video that I was going to add some performance information and performance tests about how the system worked under my new setup, but this video is already so long, I'm going to defer that into another video. And in that video, I'm also going to talk about a network upgrade I did for my house to 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. New access point, new Wi-Fi 6 router. So I'm going to put all of that along with some performance tests on this new server into that video as kind of an unintended part 2 to finish off this tech series. Let me thank all of you if you've hung in this long to watch all of this thing and all of my efforts in this rebuild. I hope you've gotten something out of it. You've seen me make some mistakes. Maybe you can avoid those mistakes in your own rebuild efforts. Proxmox is a fantastic tool. I love it. Love the virtualization environment, and I love having the setup that I've got. Let me offer a quick shout out to a bunch of different channels: Hardware Haven, Craft Computing, Techno Tim, How to Do Computers, Virtualize Everything, Linus Tech Tips. A whole bunch of different sources had lots of information that I kind of integrated into this rebuild project. And it was Hardware Haven who, when he was building one of his NAS setups, that was really the encouragement for me to go ahead and do a video just to show you how someone who is not a professional big-time YouTuber put something together to see how it would turn out. And it's turned out great. So, as always, thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. We've got a bunch of regular DIY videos for car projects that I normally do, and we'll be getting back to that later this year. If you've been watching, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you in the next video, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.